Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're going to take a look at the ARCA cars at Langley Speedway. This is a very short track, comes in at just under 4/10 of a mile, with hardly any banking to speak of. To prepare you for what this track is like, if you've ever woke up and thought, I like Martinsville, but it's just not enough like Oxford Plains, well then this track, you'll be right at home. At Martinsville, there is 0 degrees of banking on the straightaway and 12 degrees of banking in the corner, so you have a pretty big difference between your straightaway and your corner. At Langley, there is 4 degrees of banking on straightaway and 6 in the corner, so not a lot of difference, and considerably less than Martinsville, so there's not a lot of banking to lean on as you turn. And I'm telling you all of that to really drive this point home, that there is not a lot of banking to lean on in the corner, so the cars get extremely loose on corner entry, through mid-corner, and corner exit. Basically, it's just a very loose track. You'll even be loose down the straightaway. You'll be so loose, in fact, that there's not any time where you will be full throttle at this track. Oh, wait, what? Oh, I'm sorry, Clarkson, what'd you say?
Here we go. Speed and power, that's the solution. Nothing.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Clarkson. So we can see that speed and power is not always the solution. So I'll show you the next tip in a nice subtle way. I think I know what it might be now. Definitely throttle control. So you really have to mentally retrain yourself that when your foot is at 70 to 80% throttle, that's your new wide open point. Pretend that you have your foot at the floor when you're at 80% throttle and you can't push that throttle down anymore. From what I have observed this week, you do not make any of your time up by using a lot more throttle than the next driver. You'll find the majority of your time can be gained by how smooth you enter the corner and how smooth you are with your exits. And that brings us directly to our next point, which is keeping the rear tires as healthy as possible. If the rear tires get overheated or too worn, it becomes very loose on corner entry, even looser than normal, and getting out of the corner and like mid-corner gets very, very difficult. So you can help save these rear tires and improve the drivability of your car by shifting your brake bias forward. Now you all know how much I love rear brake bias. Not at this track, not this week. Move it to the front. 74 to 76 is good, maybe even a little bit more. And I find that a 12 to 1 steering ratio works best for me. A 14 and 16 to 1 is way too sluggish to actually turn down into the corner. 10 to 1 is okay, but I tended to overturn the steering wheel, so I had too much steering lock when I tried to come out of the corner, and that also made the car get loose. And I want to give you a quick way on how to judge where you should move your brake bias. So let's say you've already shifted it to the front. At the end of the race, be sure and click on the garage tab and take a look at your tire wear at the end of the race. Look at your right side tires, and if you see that the rear tires are considerably more worn than your front tires, then consider shifting the brake bias more towards the front by maybe 0.5% or 1%, and also try not to slide those rear tires on corner exit. If you happen to kill those rear tires too quickly, then you end up really chasing the back of the car around instead of being able to put any amount of throttle down. And you just get way, way, way too loose. And really the car becomes borderline undrivable. Okay, I think that's enough classroom instruction for right now, so let's go ahead and get out on track and take a look at the hot lap. Okay, now let's go through it slowly. It's such a short lap that I'm gonna have to pause it and make sure we zoom in on some things because I don't want to miss any of the important details of the lap. So like at most tracks, we're gonna do our typical lines. So what I mean by that is to start a qualifying lap, we'll take a really wide arc into the corner and cut it down in the middle of the turn to get the best run possible to start the qualifying lap. What I really want you to take note of though, be sure and look at the throttle position and the steering wheel position. So what you're going to notice is that on the corner exits of the actual qualifying lap, before I actually get the throttle down, I'm starting to unwind the steering wheel. You do not want to start putting a lot of throttle into the car with the steering wheel still cranked. Part of that is because since there's next to no banking to really rely on, the car just comes around, it just swaps directions. So now we're driving down and I'm adding throttle and I'm backing off the steering. So you can see that as I feed the throttle in, I'm using less steering. Now you want to try to get the car to connect up with this white line pretty much at this cone. That's about where you want to be. That line will let you carry the most momentum that you can through that corner. This is one of those tricky corners where if you come off of the corner kind of high, you end up having to put more steering into the car and it can get loose as you add in the throttle, and you definitely don't want that. At this point, I'm pretty much using the maximum amount of throttle that I'm going to use on this lap. I'm not going to add much more than what I just had in the car. So now the car is feeling very loose in the rear end. It's very, very light, so you have to be very gentle on the throttle. You can see that just after I cross the start-finish line, I let out of the throttle and I lightly brake to get the car to kind of turn and rotate down and get as close to this dotted white line as I can and turn in a little bit more and try to just get my tires on or just below this white and yellow line. And this is one of those things that honestly really fascinates me about this track. So the apron is completely flat. Where that white and yellow line is, right about where they meet, is where the banking starts for the track. So you've actually got a little bit more grip by dropping your left side tires below that line. Now I'm not exactly sure why that is. Like, I don't know if a little bit more of the side wall of the tire is touching the track because it has to climb up now or what, but it does work. Later in the run, you can actually run more of the car kind of on the apron and it still corners pretty nicely. Once again, you can see that as I'm adding throttle, I'm unwinding the steering. The car is feeling very loose and very light again, but you try to pick your throttle point and leave it there. Any more throttle than this isn't really going to help you. We'll talk more about that in a second. Once you're about midway down the straightaway, you can start turning in for the next corner. Medium brake pressure once again, and we're going to just hook the car on this line. You can see it kind of grab in right here and really start cornering well. And once you hook it in, you can continue to let the car roll just very briefly, get back to part throttle, and then once you're comfortable and start unwinding the steering wheel and you got the steering wheel a bit straighter, you can start feeding the power back in very gently on up to maybe 80% throttle, maybe a little bit less, and try to hold the car steady. It's going to feel pretty light in the back end this whole time, and then cross the start-finish line. Okay, in the qualifying lap, I talked about it not being advantageous to use a lot more throttle to gain speed. And these couple laps are an example of that. So here you can see I'm using roughly what we were using for throttle in the qualifying lap. I carry about 94, 95 miles per hour into the corner, and everything stays pretty drivable and the car stays nice and stable and it hooks up to the bottom of the track very nicely. Now I'm using way too much throttle, so I tried to be a little bit more aggressive with it and I ended up getting the back of the car loose and I had to chase it through the corner. Same thing here. Even though it feels faster, it's really not. You end up really upsetting the balance of the car. Another thing that you're also doing is adding that extra throttle, you're just ever so slightly spinning those rear tires a bit more and they're not really grabbing into the track. And so you're heating them up, creating excess wear, and then you get moments like this where the car just wants to go around. Alright guys, so let's review real quick. So tip number 1, throttle control. Tip number 2, if it feels fast, it isn't. So if you're driving down to the corner and the car feels like it's going to be really, really quick and you're really wheeling on it, it's probably not as fast as you want. Tip 3, be aware of tire wear. So take note at your right side tire wear numbers at the end of the race, and you might need to adjust your brake bias or maybe be a little bit lighter footed on throttle coming out of the corner. Number 4, be patient. It's a very, very tight track, so be patient with making moves, be respectful of the drivers around you. Know that there's going to be a little bit of contact this week. A little might also be an understatement. But a little bit of consideration for the drivers around you can go a long, long way. Tip 5, if you are being lapped, stay high, give the leaders the low line. That's the preferred lane, so just make sure you give them space. And that concludes the guide. As always, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in for another one. I kind of think this one is my best one yet, so let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Please leave a like because that helps YouTube know that I'm helping you guys and it might show it to more people. And I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everybody.